Carpenter, psychiatrist, host of the Heartache Connoisseur podcast. Today I continue my series on divorce. We've been pretty heavy the last couple of episodes. We're going to lighten it up a touch and start talking about the cleanup. What do you do after this thing's final? You know, now you're rebuilding, you're starting over. And there's some things to know about that. And I thought the way I would start this one is just to kind of tell a bit of my own story. We shrinks aren't supposed to talk about ourselves. It's considered a boundary violation. But you know what? Rules were made to be broken. So here goes. When I came out of my marriage, I didn't recognize myself. I did not have a solid footing in any way. I was just emotionally disoriented and angry and sad and anxious and confused and all of those things mixed up. I mean, you do it one way for however many years, and then you find yourself suddenly in a completely new life, really, almost overnight in a way. I mean, there's this moment in time where you move out of the place. It's official that you no longer live together, and maybe it's a while yet before the divorce is finalized and such, but there's sometimes some very abrupt transitions. It's not like you plan this ahead, maybe months and months in advance. Usually it's just, you may feel it on the horizon. Most people get to a point where they just can't take it anymore for whatever reason and go. And sometimes it is fairly spontaneous, but it kind of was for me in a way. But after I left, I was just basically doing anything and everything I could think of to not think about it, to kill my pain, to basically stay distracted and numb in whatever way I could figure out to do that. And, it's the typical stuff, you start hitting the bottle a little much, and you start, suddenly you're quote unquote single, you want to chase the ladies, and that's a really, really effective strategy to some degree for postponing some inevitable emotional work. And I see this a lot in my practice where people, they get out of a marriage or a long-term relationship, and then they sort of immediately dive into the dating pool and the party culture, and they're doing all the online stuff and everything. And they're not ready. It's sort of like taking people that just got back from a war and sticking them in a preschool and saying, "Here, teach the children." Put the machine gun down, pick up some markers and some paste, and try to do this. So, I mean, that's a little what it's like. I just was way out of my mind, and that took a long time. And I mean, I tell people, and it was certainly true for me, you got to give this thing a couple, 3 years sometimes before you approximate normal. I hear about these people too that get divorced and they're remarried in 3 or 4 months. I'm like, did we learn nothing? But I mean, I can see that's tempting too, because you suddenly come upon one of your worst fears, which is being alone. And it's terrifying, and you'll sort of settle for any situation except alone sometimes. And it causes you to make decisions that are at the very least questionable, and sometimes flat out wrong, sometimes even dangerous. So it's important to realize you're when you come out of a marriage and are going through a divorce, you are a loaded gun. You are not safe to your brothers and sisters out there on the street necessarily. And you got to take that into account. I mean, are you going to be responsible with this life you're given or not? I mean, I certainly have been irresponsible in many ways, but you have my permission at least to take it easy, to take some baby steps there. That reminds me of that movie, What About Bob, with Bill Murray and Richard Dreyfuss, where, you know, Bill Murray's just kind of keeps reciting the mantra, baby steps, baby steps, baby steps over here to this Kleenex box, and cries into it or whatever. And they made Richard Dreyfuss look terrible. He was always trying to escape from Bob. And I always kind of rooted for the Richard Dreyfuss character in that movie for some reason. I always figured he was just trying to get a little time off, a little space. But anyway, by the way, Bill Murray, if you're out there and would like to be a guest on my podcast, just, give me a holler. I'd love to have you anytime. I guess my message to folks, and this is born from both sort of personal experience and professional experience, is that, you gotta give it some time. You gotta do the baby step thing. You have to have reasonable expectations for yourself. You don't just pick yourself up and brush yourself off like you fell off a pony. You got some broken bones, actually. You don't just get right back on the pony. You need to lay there for a second, let some people come to you, get you on a gurney, get your bones set, your casts on, and give it some time to heal, and then take your casts off later, and then you can get back on that pony if you want to. But the healing process, the emotional healing process, is not unlike the physical healing process. It takes time, and there's consequences if you go at it too early. I think, like, I had a rotator cuff surgery a while back, and they were like, Marty, you gotta, how many weeks was it? I don't remember. It was a lot of weeks that I had to stay off my motorcycle. Way too many weeks. And I just couldn't do it. And so patience is not my strong suit, everybody. But I got back on that motorcycle a little too soon. Ultimately, there weren't any terrible long-term consequences for my shoulder. But the point was, I was pushing it. I was pushing it to the very edge because I wanted what I wanted. And I wanted it now. I wanted to be on my motorcycle. I didn't care what the doctor said or the physical therapist said to me. I wanted what I wanted. And that's where we can get kind of desperate and revert a little bit to this, bit of a toddler mentality where, me. And it makes sense too on some level, because we hurt so bad that there's no seeing anything else except our own pain. It's very difficult to make rational decisions when you're in that much pain. And that's why I think it's important to acknowledge it. I think many people don't want to admit or own the fact that they are hurt, because that would mean that they're vulnerable. That might mean that their mate got the best of them in some way. It might mean that they aren't the tough guy or gal that they thought they were. And it doesn't mean that. It means you're human. And any time a pair bond, like a marriage, falls apart, it leaves people battered in ways that they need to pay attention to. So give yourself some grace and allow yourself to have a process. It's like baking cookies or anything else. Barbecue is a good example. Barbecue is a great example. I like to barbecue a little bit. I'm not nearly as good as my friend Andre. But you got to leave that stuff in there for a long time. And if you're looking, you ain't cooking. You got to just put it in there and wait. It's like a rump roast. It takes, it takes like overnight or something to get a pulled pork ready to be eaten. And we're not any different. And if you take it out too soon, it's gross. Not only is it gross, but back in the days of trichinosis, it would have been dangerous. You probably don't remember that, but I grew up on a farm, and we slopped the hogs sometimes. And my dad was an old country doctor, and man, he scared the crap out of me and told me all about trichinosis, which is this worm that gets into your muscle fibers and lives there forever and never dies. And that's why you got to cook pork thoroughly. Well, we've pretty much eliminated trichinosis from the from the pork population, I guess, or the pig population in this country. I guess. I don't know that for sure, but that's what I understand. But I digress. The point is, when you take things out of the cooker too soon, you spoil it. You spoil the batch of cookies. You spoil the brownies. You spoil the pulled pork. I'm a woodworker, so I'm always finishing things, like spraying finishes and lacquers and polyurethane, whatever, on stuff. And oh man, it's so tempting to want to mess with it before it's dry. It's like, Marty, you just got to walk away from this thing and leave it overnight. It's going to be there tomorrow. I promise. This is me talking to myself. But I really want to do some more stuff to it right now because it's fun. We'll pick a different project. Maybe leave this in the corner, and go over here and work on this thing. But I want to work on this thing because it's more fun. Clean the tool bench. Clean it. Clean the tool bench. Wash out the sink. Take the trash out. Get the paints off to the dump. Do something that makes sense that you have to do to maintain this shop. And it's not always the fun thing. It's not always the dating, out on the scene, getting smashed. It's sometimes you got to clean your workbench. It's like the kitchen. You can't cook a new meal if you got knives and chicken juice and vegetable pieces and everything all over the place. It's not sanitary. The quality of your work is going to go down if you don't maintain your space, your workspace. And your mind is the same. Your heart is the same. You got to maintain that space or it becomes inefficient and dysfunctional. I hope that was enough metaphors for you. Next episode, we're going to talk about the rest of your life. And there is hope, and we'll get to the hope. But the cleanup process is super important. And if you don't do it, well, here's the thing. If you don't do it, the things you don't deal with are going to come back to haunt you. It's really important that you take things in a stepwise manner. Because if you do ultimately want to get into another relationship someday and you've got all this emotional baggage, your fear of abandonment, the triggers that got to you in your own marriage, and your self-worth issues and your addictions and all this, you get into a new relationship and you're going to find that those things, it's like a broken record. And suddenly the partner you're with, it's just the name has changed, and that's all. Shakespeare says that all life is a stage, and we're but actors, or something like that. And he's exactly right. I mean, I think we're all kind of living out this storyline, and you can plug any number of characters into your play, but you're the star of your own show, and as the star of your own show, you're responsible for the direction of that character. The other people in your play are not responsible for what happens to your character. You are actually responsible for that. And you can plug in Bill or Bob or John or Joe or Sally or Lucy or Mary or Tina. It doesn't matter. You're going to deal with your own junk with whoever's there. You're going to bump up against it. And their junk and your junk is going to collide and create friction and sparks, and you're going to get in fights just the same as you always did. And at some point, if you ever want a peaceful relationship again in the future, you have to do the work. Here's my soapbox. We live in a culture where we rarely are put in a situation where we actually have to do the work. This is one of those, when I was in school, we had to walk uphill both ways in the snow kind of a story. But in some ways here, with this culture we're in, with all the little glowing rectangles that everybody has in front of them all the time, you don't have to look up a word in the dictionary, or the Wikipedia has everything you need to know for your book report. There's probably somewhere on the dark web where you can buy the term paper or just cut and paste it right out of Google. And that's what people are doing now. Nobody writes their own papers in college. It's so instant. The gratification we have is so instantaneous compared to the way it used to be. I mean, I don't think you can really argue against that. You used to have to plant your food and wait for it to grow and weed it and hope it didn't get devoured by pests, and then pick it and prepare it. And it was a long time before you got from that cucumber seed to a pickle. You you got to go a lot of steps. And I like pickles, right? So maybe that's the reason I said that. I also like cucumbers, but whatever it is, it doesn't matter. There's a process that you have to abide by, and it's sort of like this world has natural rhythms and flows and cycles, and the harder you push back against those things, the more energy you will expend flailing in the wind. It's much more logical, rational, and produces a much better result if you just sort of let go and go with it. It's like being in a river. You can either, I used to go on those canoeing trips when I was a kid with the church youth group and stuff, and you get in those little rivers and your canoe dumps out and you're standing there and the current's like pounding against you, and maybe your canoe's over there and you've got to walk up against it for a little while to get to where you need to be, and then finally you get your canoe all picked back up again and you get inside of it, and wow, what a difference. You got your paddles and you got the flow of the water there, and that's how life is. There's a flow. I remember when I was going through some of the worst of my stuff, I read that Tao Te Ching like 12 times or something, and that's what they're talking about in that book. It's the Tao, it's the way, it's the underlying forces that direct this universe we're in, and we're part of this universe. And so when we don't acknowledge our rightful place in it and agree with what is just the basic truths of things, then we create a situation that's not sustainable for ourselves. And we can do this in all kinds of situations, but this is what we commonly refer to as banging our head against the wall, doing the same thing and expecting a different result. That's the Alcoholics Anonymous definition of insanity. And we're all a little insane or a lot insane, and normal is a setting on a washing machine. I've never met a normal person in my entire life. People come, it's funny, people come into my office and they're like, am I crazy? I'm like, of course you are. And I am too. How do I know when I'm sane? You're never gonna be. That's the truth. On some level, that is the exact truth. We all believe things that are exactly wrong and somewhat delusional. And we operate with principles that are not serving us well, and we're blind to it, and we're a little nuts, and it gets us into trouble. So it's actually freeing to admit that, and just to say, I don't know everything about the universe and myself. I don't know. Well, science, boy, we have a lot of information from science. Look at this. We've got our iPhones and our computers, and we've got the World Wide Web, and yeah, I know, but we're talking about the Tao. There's no instrument that measures this or detects it or finds it. I mean, why do these books and things like this stick around for thousands of years? This is my main beef with science. Look, I'm a man of science, and I'm off on a bit of a tangent here, but folks in the scientific community, I've been around a lot of PhD kind of people, lab rats and stuff. I've worked in labs, and I've run gel electrophoreses, and I've decapitated rats. I don't do that thing anymore. I've repented of that. But I used to do that, and I've cleaned beakers till the cows came home. But people in the scientific world with that mindset like to just say that if you can't see, touch, taste, smell, hear, or detect it with some form of an instrument and assign a number to it and produce a research paper about it, it doesn't exist. It's not a real phenomenon. And it couldn't be further from the truth. Now, we need science because science does actually, you know what science is doing? Really, all science is doing is taking phenomena that are there and are mysterious and mystical and poorly understood and understanding a tiny, tiny kernel about them and then getting super arrogant about what they think they know. It's sort of like, oh, I understand how a cell divides. Now I can say that there's no such thing as a God and it's all an accident. Yeah, but all you know is that maybe some things maybe evolved and that you know how a cell divides and works, kind of. But you're going to write everything else off because you know a little. You know, that's kind of the mentality. And we all have that same mentality in our own lives. Oh, I just read this book. Now I really understand things. I know what to do now. Or furthermore, you know, it's like in the church community. Well, I'm a Christian. I'm saved. I know Jesus Christ is my personal Lord and Savior. Therefore, I know how to do life. No, you don't. You don't have a clue. And you're probably saying you know Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior because that's what you think you're supposed to say. People who know Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior stop saying that kind of stuff. Now, that's not totally fair. But what they do is they moderate it. They say, what I thought I knew back then is different than what I know now. There's a lot of truths to what I knew back then, but they're true for different reasons than I understood them to be. Let's go with the salvation example. You know, you ask a young person how they know they're a Christian, and they'll say, well, I got saved. I accepted Jesus Christ into my heart. And you ask an old, wise, mystical Christian how they got saved, or if they're saved, and they'll say, well, you know, funny thing about that, it takes a long time to work out your salvation, and you do it with fear and trepidation over years. Blood, sweat, and tears go into that. It's a reworking, a remodeling. It's a transformation that's gradual, called sanctification, being made holy, and it doesn't happen in a millisecond at a church camp when you're 16 and you're done. That's not how it works. If you think it works like that, you're gonna live a really rigid, black and white, rules-based life that's not really very fun. And that's my take on that one. But how does this all tie into the cleanup? Really, everything I'm talking about is respecting the process. I mean, if you could sum up all of the flaws of humanity in one word or one sentence, it's like, that's it. Like, we don't respect the process. We don't allow it to just unfold. Everybody wants to open their Christmas presents early. You know, nobody wants to wait till Christmas morning. Everybody wants to get rich quick and win the lottery. And, you know, musicians think they deserve a record deal yesterday. And, you know, painters wonder why people don't want to pay thousands of dollars for their stuff and all that kind of thing. It's like, well, you gotta earn your way there. You gotta go out there and bust your hump for a long time sometimes. You know, there's occasionally people that get lucky or are born with some ungodly set of genes that allow them to run a 40-yard dash in 4 seconds, and they get on the football team and they never even have to go to practice. But those are extremely rare people, and it comes catching up with them someday too. But you got to respect the process, especially post-divorce, because that's when you're really vulnerable. And I think that's another thing to keep in mind. Coming out of a divorce, or really any emotional trauma, but especially divorce, which is, it's got to rank up there in the top 2 or 3 most stressful events that one can go through in their life. It's up there with like losing a child, getting fired, and having to, you know, sell your house. You know, it's way up there. It's much more traumatic than I realized, and I did not know the degree to which it was going to tear my meat house down, if you will. But when you come out of those things, you're not seeing straight, and you're pretty much vulnerable to any snake oil salesman that comes along. Any kind of any kind of scheme you run across to get through it in a way that's not consistent with the nature of things is going to look very attractive to you. And it's like if you go dating, let's say, and you meet this person, and it's not very long since you've been divorced or separated or whatever, and you start noticing the ways that they're different from your ex, and initially that looks like the greatest thing in the world. Well, look at them, they're perfect, right? They're the opposite of this person. They have all these qualities and characteristics, and we want so bad to be with somebody, and we're blind to their flaws, and then we strike up a relationship with them, and it doesn't take very long to realize that while they may have certain personality characteristics that are different and maybe even a little bit refreshing, they've got their own list of flaws and ways that you're going to have to adjust yourself to be with them. So what do you do? I mean, you got to clean up step by step, and there's some practical considerations. There's things like furniture and utensils. You may find yourself in a different living space, and you used to have. You're like, where did that one spatula I really like for eggs go? She has it. She has it. Where, that kind of thing will happen over and over again. It's like, I thought I had a garden hose. Where did my damn ladder go? I mean, that's what it's like. And it's disorienting, like on that level. And, your set of friends changes too. Maybe you had these couple friends that you hung out with, and they all broke with her, or something like that, or vice versa. And so now you're looking around for people who basically are oftentimes in the same situation you are. You may have had a lot of couple friends, and now you find yourself single, and so single, it makes more sense to have single friends, and you got to go meet them and whatever. You got to get used to being a third wheel or something like that when you go over to your couple friends' houses and stuff, and sort of take it all in, what it means to walk alone into an event that's filled with couples, some nice dinner or event or banquet or something, and everybody's there with their partner, and you're a person now that has some gray hair, and you're standing there in your suit all by yourself, and that's a bit of a slap in the face. You got to get used to stuff like that. Cooking for one, getting used to shopping for one and cooking for one, getting used to entirely new routines with your children. Maybe you lived 3 blocks from school, and now you live 20 minutes away or something, and your kids are having their own adjustment issues, and so you've got to set your own emotional crises aside long enough to help them adjust to it, and so that's disorienting. And then there's money. You're oftentimes trying to make ends meet on much less than you had before, and that's disorienting. And if you take all that together and consider whether or not you're ready to enter into some kind of a romantic relationship, I mean, it starts to look a little bit absurd, doesn't it? It does to me. But we do it, and I understand why. And it's not, you shouldn't beat yourself up. And I will also say that sometimes couples that meet right after or during a divorce, they make it work long term, and they're fine. And whatever. I mean, there's no one right way for everybody. But I can tell you that on average, I see a lot of people who come in who are dealing with not only the heartbreak of their divorce, but the heartbreak of boyfriend number 1 and boyfriend number 2 and boyfriend number 3. And now it's a series of heartbreaks that they're dealing with all at the same time. And it's just it's piling on. And so that's maybe a way to think about it. Don't pile on. Don't add things into your life that are going to make it more difficult for yourself. And the time will come And you're gonna find a much better mate for yourself too if you are healthy when you're looking. I think I said this recently, but emotional health is birds of a feather flock together in that regard. A lot of times people of roughly the same level of health will tend to latch on to one another. And so if you go out there unhealthy, you're going to end up with somebody unhealthy, because healthy people can spot you coming a mile away. They know a train wreck when they see one. Gosh, it's like I look back to my dating times. I'm like, I'm glad that woman had the sense to tell me no. I saved her a lot of consternation, or she saved herself. Anyway, but you have it in you, and this is a truth about people, and we see it in kids too. I mean, we're so resilient. We really are. We can be, if we allow ourselves to adjust the facts that we believe about ourselves and our world. If we allow ourselves to be malleable, we're like clay. I love these biblical images of like the potter and the clay. You can take a lump that's amorphous and doesn't look like anything except a pile of crap maybe, and turn it into this lovely, beautiful vessel. And we're like that. And then you can take that vessel and squish it back up into a pile of crap, and you can turn it back into a vessel again and again. Fine metals are like this, like gold. You can take a gold fork and turn it into a gold ring, and it doesn't lose the fundamental integrity of what it's made out of. And people are a lot like that as well. We are malleable, but we have to allow ourselves to be worked over by that blacksmith hammer. So anyways, I think that's about it. And the next episode, we're going to focus a bit on the rest of your life and what that can look like coming through this time period. And there is hope, but be patient with yourself. Baby steps. Bill Murray, if you're out there, I love your work. And I'm looking forward to continuing to do these podcasts, and it's fun. I mean, I'm starting to get a little feedback from people now, and some folks find it helpful, and people are like, when's the next one coming out, and all this. And hey, that's really rewarding. So keep that feedback coming. That's really great. It encourages me. And please share, please subscribe. YouTube won't even give me a custom link till I've got 100 subscribers. So, my YouTube address is like XP19RQ17C. It's like I can't get, so help a brother out there if you would, please. And so the Facebook and the Instagram and all that stuff as well. And I'm Martin Carpenter. I am the Heartache Connoisseur, and I am off to see patients. See you later, everybody.